Welcome to Critical Thoughts. I'm your host, Braxton Smith. Joining me today is Jake Bird. And today we're going to discuss Presidential Day 2020. We're a week late, but, deal with it, I guess. Scheduling conflicts and all that. But this one's actually going to be a pretty good one. We're going to do best and worst veto and best and worst executive order. Now, we spent some time looking up through the search engines, trying to play around with the algorithms, trying to find the best way to ask the search engine about some of the more notable vetoes and executive orders. Interesting pattern we found is that for some reason it was really easy to find the best vetoes, and it was really easy to find the worst executive orders. So you see like a reigning theme there is it almost seems like when it comes to shutting down the government, putting in a new law, you can't hardly fuck that up. And when it comes to making a new law, probably going to be taking away freedoms. Usually new laws means less freedoms. Never really goes the other way, it seems. But you want to throw in anything before we get started here, Jake?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. I also collected some just general data. And there's some other trends as well when you look at this stuff. You'll notice for the executive orders, whether you do it by just total number or the number per each year of their term, the least amount of executive orders is pretty much within the first 15 presidents, around the founding generations. And then the most, pretty much the solid block is during what we usually call the progressive time. It starts right off with Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, and then it usually ends around Eisenhower with a few little exceptions at the bottom and stuff, but
well, it's what most people call progressives. It's what you and me call the downfall of America. And most people in the liberty more like regressive anyways. Yeah,
but some of the things when we were talking about that, I found interesting is I think I asked you once too, who do you think passed the most executive orders? And you got FDR, right? Mm-hmm. But then, what's the next one? You were thinking Obama or maybe Bush or something. And it's like, yeah. Nope, we're still all the way up there in that time frame. The 10.
Who was the next one, though? So FDR had the most, and then who was next? Was that Wilson? Wilson would be my next guess.
Yeah, that was Wilson. And then it's Coolidge, of all people.
That one still blows my mind.
And then after that, it's Teddy. And then, it shrinks down. The last number for the top 10 most executive orders is Reagan in absolute terms. When it comes to the rate per year, it's Carter. But, that's another thing. I would have guessed Carter first, but then again, he also only had one term. So.
Damn. He's cranking them out while he was in there, huh? All right, so you have one. Do you have one for the vetoes?
Yeah, I got the list of the.
Oh, it's got the vetoes and the executive orders? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Damn, nice.
And, I didn't do any highlighting on this one because it kind of just jumps around. But, yeah, the most vetoes was FDR in total. The next person that comes close to it's
Cleveland. Yeah. The only reason I know that is because Jake sent me the link with all the executive orders. And it was like I was telling him, when I was scrolling through, the executive orders, trying to read them off, I got to Grover Cleveland, and it was like I said, it was like trying to escape after you've already entered the event horizon. It just was nonstop. So many vetoes. He was renowned as the veto king, but you said FDR actually edged him out on vetoes?
Well, if you just separate him because he was not consecutive with his terms, if you separate out his terms, FDR beats him. If you combine his terms together, he just narrowly edges them out by like 20 or so vetoes. So that's the main thing for that. And then after that, it drops down to Truman. And then after that, you don't even hit 100 vetoes anymore.
All right. Well, with that being said, do you want to which one do you want to start with?
Pick your poison.
I already did. Let's go with vetoes. That one's like usually a little funner because like it's I would say usually vetoes pan out better for people anyways. Do you want to go ahead and take us away on the best veto, since I pick vetoes. Now you get to tell me what your best veto is.
I'll go ahead and I'll go with a classic OG one, George Washington. He pretty much,
good.
Yeah, he set the pace for it, and the first thing he did was the Apportionment Act of 1792 that he vetoed, and he was pretty much saying, the Constitution regulates how representation is done for the House of Representatives, and that's the way it is. So don't go fucking with it. That's pretty much all it is. The Federalists were trying to make it more on a national basis for census instead of each state reviewing based on that number and apportioning that way. So
Okay.
it's pretty much making the Electoral College reflect more of like the national popular vote instead of each state has its own representation.
Okay. Well, for my best veto, I got kind of like a toss-up on this one. I was actually really torn. I've always been inspired by this one, and I recently found out. So originally I read about how Grover Cleveland was approached by Congress. They came and they told him, we have this huge catastrophe with the agricultural community right now. They had all these crop failures. They need to be bailed out. I don't have the exact numbers, but I want to say it was in the millions, possibly approaching in the billions. And you got to keep in mind, this is a long time ago. And Congress came to him, or rather the farmers came to Congress and said we needed a bailout. And so Congress came to, they passed the votes, and then they came to Cleveland and they said, we need a bailout. And his response was, I believe in the American people to come up with their own response. You don't need the government to bail you out. Figure it out yourselves. And they actually, the amount they requested was that, like, they went back to the American people asking for help, and through charity itself, they got 5 times, I believe it was 5 times what they originally proposed to get bailed out from Congress. So rather than from gunpoint saying, hey, hand over your money, actually going as a charity and requesting help, they got 5 times what they originally requested, and they prevailed. And I got to throw Calvin Coolidge in with that too, because he did the same thing with farm subsidies. They asked for a bailout, and he was just like, figure it out, we bail you out. And it's all the wheat farms, all the people that are conducting business in a manner that isn't profitable will continue conducting business in a manner that isn't profitable.
So what you're saying is they were evil, heartless men that allowed children to starve and forced the poor and the most downtrodden in America to try to fit the bill.
And that's exactly how it'd be spun today. You're absolutely right about that. Oh, apparently President so-and-so wants the children to starve to death. No, you'll figure it out. And that's what I think is very important, because it sets a precedence. And obviously it's barely even an echo in today's policies that, people should come up with their own solutions. They shouldn't go to Congress for it. We should try to figure it out amongst ourselves first. Use Congress as a last resort for things. Because
That ties in a lot with, there's an urban story with Davy Crockett when he used to be a senator for Congress and stuff. And I'm forgetting the exact situation, but again, there was some sort of crisis. There was people in need, and Congress was trying to pass this bill to requisition the funds from the revenue. And he gets up and he goes, I am all for helping the people of the United States in their troubled times, but we have no authority in the Constitution to take revenue from the just enumerated powers enlisted to us and putting it into any other situation. I forget the total of the amount, but he pretty much said, I will stake my senator's pay for this month to go into this cause through charity. And if every single one of these other congressmen stood with me, we would not only cover the amount you're asking for right now, but we would overshoot it. I hope my fellow congressmen will stand with me and denounce this legislation, but go with this charity approach. And as it's supposedly been said, it got knocked down, but no, there wasn't this outflow of congressmen throwing in the dollars.
How about that? Big fucking surprise there, even in that day. But, for me, one last note on that before we move on. I'd like to point out that, to me, people like to stand on their, ivory towers and like to moral, grandstand about, what is just and what isn't. And they say, we must tax these people to pay these people. And to me, there is no more virtuous thing than to willingly give of your own wealth to those in need. When you are actually forced to give of your wealth, there's nothing virtuous about that. You're being forced to, so you're going to do that. That makes you amoral at the least. I would even argue immoral for not standing up and saying, this is unjust. But there's nothing moral at all about forcefully extracting the wealth from one people to give to a cause. So, and I think it's funny too that a lot of the people that usually support that are usually the ones that actually give of their own wealth the least. There's studies out all about that. But anyways, moving on. So we just did the best vetoes. Now we got to do for the very difficult to find, and we didn't really do a good job of this one because there's no list for it. But now we're going to do the worst vetoes. Jake, take it away.
Oh, I get to be the first one out. Well, I was able to find a list, and I'm sure everyone knows we like picking on FDR, and I found this nice one, H.R. 8046. That he vetoed, called to provide a penalty for the knowing or willful presentation of any false written instrument relating to any matter within the jurisdiction of any department or agency of the government with the intent to defraud the United States.
All right, so I get that, but go ahead and translate that for everybody else.
So basically, Congress wanted to pass a law saying that if it can be determined that you knowingly tried to defraud the United States government, didn't matter what department, didn't matter what branch, there would be some penalty associated with it, and he vetoed it. So, Mr. Let me fireside chat with the people and let them know how the state of the U.S. is really doing, is balking against truth and being held accountable.
Well, I mean, that's the thing though, Jake. It's FDR, so I mean, you and I are already pretty well versed on what kind of a guy FDR is, but the people still touting him as top 3 president.
Yeah,
Sure.
It's usually him, Lincoln, and Wilson.
Oh my God. So. And anybody watching this video right now already knows how we feel about that.
Yeah, just watch our past presidential video.
Yeah, we got a lot to say about that. So for mine, wasn't quite as far-reaching, I guess, as that one, but it was just one of those that's just like one of those where it's like it's almost like he was posing as a bad guy wrestler. It's almost like as if I was telling you earlier, if Cobra Commander became Cobra Commander in Chief. This one is actually from Barack Obama. I just skimmed past this and I read it and I thought it was total, like, it looked like something out of The Onion, like it looked like satire, but he legit vetoed a bill that would actually give the rights to families whose family members died in 9/11 to sue Saudi Arabia. Now, I'm sure everybody knows by now that the people that were on board the planes, piloting them, driving the planes into the buildings, were citizens of Saudi Arabia. And so some of the family members were looking to be compensated for that. And in response to that, Obama vetoed that bill that would allow them to sue the government of Saudi Arabia, citing it would harm our relations with a country that took down our World Trade Centers, which caused us to go to war in the Middle East. So.
Well, Braggs, is there any proof that they were government operatives?
Yeah, and I'm surprised they didn't go with that one because that's usually a pretty good one to scapegoat on. But usually they just kind of try to hush all that. There hasn't really been any proof one way or the other as far as I've researched that they were government operatives or otherwise. But what we do know is that they were all Saudi citizens. Kind of weird that, that's the common denominator, and you still haven't had an apology from Saudi Arabia or saying that, hey, we don't know what the hell they were doing. It was just like, yeah, you'll put up with it. Swept under the rug.
I'll do a rare turn and defend the great president from a racist like you, but, you can't say that they were actually government operatives. That would be kind of like if we had someone touring in France or something, and then they just decided to go all helter-skelter, would you expect the U.S. government to issue an apology or be part of a lawsuit for just one person's actions?
It wasn't one person's actions with these planes, though. We had several
one group of people not affiliated with the government.
I think the president could at least say, hey, sorry, they don't represent anything we believe in. I mean, what would that hurt?
Okay, what would it hurt, but would it be required? And if they didn't do it, should there be a lawsuit? All right.
Why not? Let the courts figure it out. I mean, why is that the president's choice? Why can't the judge be the one to say, like, yeah, this isn't really their fault. Sorry, guys. Like, why does the president got to get involved on that? Because he's Iraq Hussein Osama. There it is. Checkmate. Where's my scoreboard? Arguments on 1 against Jake.
Well, if he doesn't have to get involved, then there's no business in him doing it in the first place of issuing the apology or anything like that.
Well, to me, why did he have to veto it, though, is what I'm getting at. Like, just give them the ability, let it have its day in court, let's get to the bottom of it, let's figure it out. But no, we don't want to figure out why Building 7 collapsed, because that'll wake the people up, Jake.
Okay, so pass any legislation, no matter how frivolous it is, if it
gave them the ability to take it to the courts. It wasn't for the lawsuit itself. It just gave them the ability to go to court with it. Get smart with me one more time, Jake.
I think it doesn't just give the ability, because we're talking about international law. It is pretty much just hurrah, let's do it type of thing.
All right, so moving on to executive orders.
It's okay, Rex. I know you're racist. That's all.
That's a good goy there, Jake. All right, best executive order. Let's go. I just got Drink break.
The best executive order would have to be Gerald Ford when he completely dismantled all the price and wage controls that FDR set up during the Great Depression and World War II.
Damn, that's a pretty
I
good one.
say all of them, but like 98% of them.
That's a pretty damn good one, actually. But I think I can do you one better here, Jake. So I'm not going to contend everything you do. I'm sure there's some
validity in my actions.
I'm sure I could come up with some presidential overreach. It should be left up to Congress kind of thing that you like to do with me all the time. So we're just going to go straight into one. I can do you one better, right? So price control, pretty important, but I got to go with one of the presidents I hate the most, Abraham Lincoln. I think he did all right when he did the inevitable Emancipation Proclamation. And I say it was inevitable because it was something that the Founding Fathers set up to begin with. It was kind of Thomas Jefferson and I believe even George Washington, several of the Founding Fathers straight out the gate set up the Constitution and intended for policies to head in this direction, and that's why I say it was inevitable that one day you would have the Emancipation Proclamation. So it wasn't like he was, I guess maybe for the time it was still kind of a little edgy, but you just won a war, so I guess you can really do whatever the fuck you want to, and maybe that's what it took. But yeah, so it was where he obviously freed all the slaves. So it was where he said that regardless of your race and background, we are now at this point all equals. There's no more slavery in the U.S.
I guess I'm going to get to risk sounding like the racist
come on,
this
come on,
time.
you fucking racist. Let's go.
But first of all, the war wasn't over. Second of all, the Emancipation Proclamation only freed those slaves that were taken over by the Union Army. There were still Union states that had slaves at the time. But, other than that, yeah, I agree with the sentiment.
I actually did not. I did not know that. You said during the war there's still Yankee states that had slaves?
Yes.
That's news to me. Wow.
That's why they eventually had to get the 13th Amendment passed.
Which is funny because that actually I'm like probably one of the bigger Confederate apologists you'll ever meet, or sympathizers rather, and I was not aware of that. That makes me even all the more firm in my convictions. With that being said, actually piggybacking on that, we're going to move on to the worst executive order, which was also by the same president. I bet you already. You know what, Jake? You go ahead and tell everybody the one I'm about to call out now.
Well, I mean, since you're talking about Lincoln, I guess it has to be the good old. And it wasn't just one executive order. It was actually a series of executive orders, but the suspension of habeas corpus.
There it is. Yep. So at the time, obviously, the war was very unpopular. The South was taking up its constitutional right to secede from the Union and become its own state. And Abraham Lincoln decided that couldn't be, and so that obviously was not very popular. And you were talking about a war that would ultimately lead. Granted, people didn't know this, but we can now look back on it and say it would ultimately lead to more American casualties than any other war in American history. That was the Civil War. And so obviously it's going to be very unpopular. A lot of people did foresee that, and they stood against that, and they said, no, they have the constitutional right to secede. And a lot of these people, Abraham Lincoln sent off to what was a place, very renowned prison, had its own island.
They already had Alcatraz back
Alcatraz, yes, they did. they were sent to Alcatraz for speaking out against the president and his decision to go to war and fight back against the rebels. And so anybody saying that they had a constitutional right, they were just like, hey, you shut up about that or you get locked up. And again, some of your more prominent people were sent off to Alcatraz for that. So habeas corpus is essentially your due process. It's your right to go to a court and say, hey, I have my First Amendment right to speak out against this war. Hey, the suspension of habeas corpus said, you have no constitutional rights. Like, all your rights are gone. If we tell you, hey, you can't have guns, you can't have guns. If we say, hey, you can't say this about whatever, you either shut up or you go to jail. So, there's some pretty screwed up executive orders out there, but to me, that one takes the cake. Due process.
Just a little bit more on that, because I kind of got caught up in that story too. Originally, who could suspend habeas corpus was actually Congress. And even before the war, but for at least 2 years before they passed the Habeas Corpus Suspension Act, Lincoln was throwing people away with those executive orders. So he was acting unconstitutional up until that point. But, once they passed that law, they gave him the veneer for the rest of them. But that law continued up until Johnson, the president after him, his VP. And you've watched National Treasure, right? The second one with Nicolas Cage.
I haven't seen the second one. I've seen the first one. I didn't get to see the second one.
Well, in the second one, he talks about, basically the whole thing is he's trying to clear his family's name from the Civil War. And it's like...
Was being a Yankee, you didn't want to be a Yankee. I got you. Sons of Confederacy, that's right.
They were trying to make it look like his family was involved in the assassination of Lincoln.
Yeah.
And one of his friends goes like, well, why do you worry about that anyways? Everybody knows it's not true.
Oh.
But he goes like, well, it didn't matter for Mud either, because the phrase his name was Mud comes from the first group of people that were actually arrested for his assassination, but ultimately proved not to be true. And Johnson used the Habeas Corpus Suspension Act for a handful of them, and there were people executed.
Oh my God.
Without proper trial for Lincoln's assassination. One of them was Mary Surratt, a woman.
Yeah, and they didn't do anything wrong. I don't understand. Lincoln deserved to be assassinated. Why were they... That's bizarre to me. I don't get it. But
the normal person would go, it was John Wilkes Booth. Why would they set up a kangaroo court? But yeah. But, and then, after they found out that it was improperly used, surprise, surprise, it got repealed. But, a little piece of history.
It got repealed. Jesus H. Christ. So what would you say was the worst executive order? Come on, have something to do with W. W had pretty good ones.
Well, I still gotta go with FDR on that one, taking over the. What Ford gave back to us, FDR took away. But, if you want to talk about W. Bush, there is an interesting one. He passed an executive order tied to Hurricane Katrina and stuff and trying to effectively mobilize relief for that. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards he amended it and he had them take out the words hurricane relief and put in counterterrorism.
Oh my God. That totally sounds made up.
No, and then Obama, uh, he amended it just to extend the time period.
Jeez. Okay,
Oh,
so we're not going for most retarded executive orders. Or preferably like ones that did the most damage to humanity.
well, I mean,
FDR.
that's the thing when you're talking about mobilizing the money and the agencies to a cause.
Yeah.
He just took the basic one for hurricane relief. He took out hurricane relief and he said, "All right, we're going to take this same effort and put it to counterterrorism
Yeah, the people support it
and
according to our
homeland
statistics.
security."
Yeah, people can get behind that. Not everybody can relate with hurricanes, but everybody can relate with how bad terrorism is.
Sometimes, in order to protect our country's freedom and security, we have to get rid of the freedom.
And the security.
Well, it's fine if they have security from other people, but from us, the government, no. We're the good guys. What do they have to hide?
Yeah, I mean, why not let the government come into your house and your emails? Do you have anything to hide? So what's your deal from FDR though, huh?
What do you mean? What's my deal?
You're the worst executive order. So like you just named like an absurd one, but I thought you had one for FDR, no? Or did I
Yeah,
misread that?
well, it's like, I said the best one was Ford as he took off all the wage and price
Yeah,
controls that FDR set up. So I'm saying
naturally.
FDR's is actually his implementation. Congress passed the act for him to handle any emergency, and he just ran with it full force, throwing everything on his back.
Dude, FDR is just fodder, man. It's like, I mean, and then on top of that, you got the damn, what was it, like the gold extraction from the people.
Gold
Oh
and
my
silver, and he did
God.
that before the war.
No, because he knew what was going to happen. This is out of Jake's realm here. This is my realm. Conspiracy theory. He knew a war was going to happen, and that's why he did it. But of course, Jake's going to say, no, he was an innocent president. We were an innocent country. We would never go to war unless we absolutely had to.
Well, if you look at the time frame, it hadn't even started in Europe yet, so it was past that. It's still trying to deal with the Great Depression, but yeah. I've got a small little list here. Um, we've got gold confiscation. We've got farm product control. So he started setting limits on to what farms could actually
Yeah, I
produce.
remember that one. Yeah.
Control of petroleum, iron and steel controls, the National Labor Board expansion, which is basically he made the U.S. government the complete resolution. He made it pretty much the strong arm for unions and stuff. And it's funny, too, because, well, I'll get to that, but it seems like whenever there was a union strike going on, well, we've got this war effort, we need production. Well, I guess the government needs to just seize the company so we can continue production. Isn't it convenient?
I mean,
But
I still get my union sanctioned smoke breaks, though, right? Like, right, Jake? Hello.
well, at least until Clinton. But let's say Export Import Bank, silver confiscation, National Guard mobilization. FDR was the first president that tried to take the National Guard from their duty of protecting the states and actually have them go overseas.
Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? Actually, we don't have much more time here. We're at 35 minutes, but yeah, that is actually a really interesting note. I've always wondered that, like, because I remember like Iraq, Afghanistan, the war on terror, if you will. They kept sending a National Guard, and I'm like, What nation are they guarding here? Like, aren't they supposed to be guarding America? Like, what the hell are they doing over here? Like, that blew my mind. Like, and there was like, we're from Alabama. It was like Alabama, like State Guard was going over to Iraq, and then just what the hell was that all about?
Yeah, because the National Guards are actually supposed to be the equivalent now of militias.
Yeah, they're supposed to be
for self-defense and
right.
stuff. It's like, oh no, I didn't realize that the Heart of Dixie was somewhere in Afghanistan. Who would have known?
Yeah, well, I mean, after the towers fell, I guess it was really fucking redneck army.
Well, now you know it was before even that.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, there's like a whole list of them and stuff, and I guess maybe in further episodes we'll just elaborate on it further.
Now, let me just be clear, folks. Let me be clear. I had this conversation with Jake earlier, and he was totally concerned with future episodes about like what we're going to talk about with presidential, related topics for President's Day, and here we are, already running out of time. We'll come up with more topics. I'm sure our opinions will change, and maybe we'll actually create a solid list of bad vetoes and good executive orders, which seems to be rare. But we're actually looking into putting out another video, though. I'm going to be giving y'all a heads up, or at least like I'm going to be discussing an issue that concerns me that's going on in the world right now with that's food related. There's a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, everybody's well read up on the coronavirus at this point. We plan on discussing that. It's probably going to be a little more interesting than this one. This is like pretty dry. I get it, but it's not as sensationalized. But yeah, I just wanted to relay my concerns for whoever may still be watching us, because I feel like I at least owe it to you. If you care enough to watch, then I should care enough to share my thoughts with you. So, we'll look into doing a video on that very soon, probably same day. We'll see. You have any last thoughts, Jake?
Yeah, so you heard it right there, folks. Brax is all for major depopulation of the world through famine. That's what it translates to.
No, Jake, see, and you heard it here, folks. Jake is projecting. All right, well, that sums it up for us anyways. Thank you again for tapping into Critical Thoughts, breaking through the white noise to bring you media that matters.
Cheers.